Kevin Borba, Locked on Buffs, joins me to talk about both of Colorado's star prospects, Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders, next on the Locked on Browns podcast.
You are Locked on Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked on Browns podcast. I'm proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. Kevin Borba here to talk about Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders. What do they bring to the table? Could the Browns actually end up with both players in this year's draft? We'll get into all of that and more. Plus, I answer some of your questions on a Fan Friday here on the show. Do want to remind you and thank you for being an everydayer with the Locked on Browns podcast, making this your first listen every day. Remember, you can find Cleveland Browns content with Locked on Browns every week, Monday through Friday, guaranteed, plus bonus content on the weekends. And it's totally free to you. Just hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you get your podcasts, and, of course, the Locked on Browns YouTube channel, where you can also get involved in the show, share your thoughts on anything we discussed today in the comments section. This is your team, so be part of the conversation every single day. And today's show is brought to you by Nissan, the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay tuned for the Armada Player of the Week coming up later in the show. Kevin, I'm excited to have you on, man. We were sort of talking a little bit here before we got started, but I can imagine that you've been inundated with all kinds of conversations like this year because for whatever reason, all of a sudden the Colorado Buffaloes are like the talk of the town when it comes to prospects that are entering the NFL draft.
Yeah, it's been kind of crazy to see the transition from like, oh, it's just Deion's kid and his friend to now it's like, okay, these are legitimate like top 10 prospects. Like that is how the narrative has sort of changed. I think around Colorado, there was always an expectation that they could be going this high in the draft, but I feel like the general football population is now just like hitting that realization.
That's so funny. It's Deion's kid and his friend. That's so good.
That's what it felt like. And now everyone's just like, oh, we have to take this serious.
Well, the Browns are certainly taking it serious with both these guys. There's been so much conversation around both Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders being potential selections of the Browns throughout this pre-draft process. For a while, it felt like the tides really were sort of in Shedeur's favor. Now, all of a sudden, after their pro day last week, it feels like that's all kind of shifted to Travis Hunter. So we'll start with Travis Hunter. I still want to talk about Shedeur, though, as well. So we'll get to that in the second sort of segment here. But as I think about Travis Hunter, obviously the number one thing everyone talks about is the fact that he can play both ways. And he has said he wants to play both ways. I want to ask you, though, Kevin, like, do you think he has a chance to be more successful as a corner or as a wide receiver at the NFL level?
Yeah, I love this question. Locked on Buffs fans hate this answer that I give because I always preface this with this portion right here. Do I think Travis Hunter could play both ways? Absolutely. I think he's a gifted generational athlete. I think he's probably, had he focused on either position specifically in college, he'd probably be DB1 and wide receiver 1, which he might even be already at both right now. Yeah. That being said, I think once you get to the NFL level, I think you have to play him at wide receiver. Realistically, I think he's best with the ball in his hands. And I also don't really know how teams would feel about him sort of being a part-time whatever, right? If he's playing wide receiver 75% of the time, that's 25% of the snaps that he's not playing because he's playing defense, which means he's taken away from the offense. And then defensively, it's like, are you really getting the most out of him if you're only using him in certain packages? And so I think the best way to maximize him is at one position. And I think that position, if I were him, I'd want to play receiver, right? You get to score touchdowns, you get more money, career longevity, right? No one could touch you really. They don't allow contact anymore in the NFL. So like, why would you not want to play wide receiver? And I think that's where he's better off anyway.
It's funny you say that. Like you said, Buffs fans don't love that answer. I think Browns fans are actually loving hearing that answer because that is the thing that Andrew Berry talked about at the Combine over a month and a half ago. They view him more as a wide receiver than they do a corner, which was kind of shocking at the time because everybody was talking about Travis Hunter more so as a DB than a receiver, and so they kind of went against the grain in that way. I don't know. Like your point is valid on how he bounces around between the two if he does actually play both ways. And I guess like what do you know about how he handled that at the college level? Because it is like you're going in different meetings. There's defensive meetings. There's your position group meetings on both sides of the ball as well. There's offensive meetings. How does he kind of handled that and been able to sort of navigate that already? Because I'm not so worried about that. People are bringing that up a lot now. Like, how would he go between rooms, and how can he be part-time in some meetings and part-time in another, and then like out in the field doing different things? But I just kind of chalk that up to like, well, he's done it his whole career, so I'd imagine he'd figure it out at the NFL level as well.
Yeah, I would also like to preface it with Travis is probably the hardest working individual I've ever seen in the football space. He like craves playing every snap. Like he wants to. He's played I think he averaged over 120 snaps a game. Like there is no issue there. There's no issue in preparation. I saw a quote the other day, and this isn't an exact quote, so something along the lines, because someone was talking about Tetro McMillan saying he doesn't like to watch film.
I saw that, yeah.
Travis Hunter was like, I sleep for X amount of hours. The rest of the day, I have time to prepare for football. Like he is that dedicated to football. And so I don't really think there is a preparation issue at Colorado. And I think this is where it could be difficult in the NFL. They kind of catered to him in a sense, where it was like he didn't practice all the time. So they gave him more time to rest, right? Is an NFL team going to be willing to let a rookie, or even if he's third year guy, be like, okay, Travis, Monday through Wednesdays, you're off. And Thursdays you join us for the walkthrough, and Friday or whatever the schedule is, right? I don't know. I don't foresee that happening, because I don't think the NFL is really unless you're a quarterback, I don't see them like sort of catering to one individual player. That being said, he has done it, right? He's prepared with both. He's a savant at receiver. He's a savant at corner. I think he understands the game intellectually more than most people even realize is possible. And I think it just comes down to, and this is like the hard part about this whole situation, is how willing, in this case, would the Browns be to sort of adjusting the traditional norms of being an NFL player, right? Are they going to let him practice one day at receiver, practice another day at corner, have this day off? Are they going to put him on a pitch count? Are they going to be fine with putting him on a pitch count? Because Travis Hunter himself will be prepared. He wants to do this more than anything, right? I think he's been saying it. Deion Sanders has been saying it. He even said that he would tell Roger Goodell he wants him to announce him as a wide receiver and corner. So like he wants this really bad. But I think someone has to be the adult in the room and make the proper decision. And I don't know what that decision is, but I think Travis could do it. Doesn't mean he should, though.
Yeah, I like your point on like him being a rookie and getting days off potentially, because like we see that at the NFL level. Myles Garrett, for example, he gets like a veteran day off on Wednesdays. Like he doesn't practice, but he's a guy who's been in the league for 8 years. Like it's not easy to convince a team like, hey, we're giving this rookie time off. Granted, he would maybe be playing both ways so they could understand it, but yeah, it's an interesting sort of dynamic there. I guess along those lines, like I've always felt it feels easier for him to be a defensive back and then like have a package on offense for him that maybe allows him to do a little bit of both. How do you kind of envision it being the opposite for him? Like how could a team like the Browns make him primarily a wide receiver and then still try to get him in on defense in your eyes?
Yeah, I think that's the hard part. I think it's easier to do what you said, like make him a corner and then throw him in on packages. But I think, and this is what I'll give you sort of like a prediction of what will happen. Like if the Browns draft him or whoever drafts him, I think they'll entertain it for preseason, maybe even part of the season. And I think there's going to be a moment, whether it's maybe he gets a little banged up, whether it's his performance is slacking on one side of the ball, which I don't think will happen. Like I think Travis is going to be a really great player. That being said, I don't know if it's going to be able to sustain, because it's 17 games in the NFL minimum.
Yeah.
Right. And he has not played a full college season once. Like he missed 3 games, I think it was last year, missed part of a game this past season because he got banged up a little bit. This season he was more healthy, but I just don't know how you balance that, honestly. Like there's not really an answer to your question, because the only way in my head is like you put him on a pitch count and then you're like, okay, we just spent the 3rd pick on this guy and he's only playing X amount of snaps per game and we needed him at crunch time, but he hit his pitch clock by the 3rd quarter, or we couldn't use him in the 3rd quarter because we wanted to save him for the 4th quarter. And by the time the 4th quarter rolled around, the game was over, right? So I just don't know how you find that balancing act. I think it comes down to a couple things, and you could attest to this more than anyone. It comes down to where they like him better, which obviously you said receiver. And 2, people forget the NFL is a business, right? So Travis Hunter wants to play both ways. I think, and this is like the shady side of the NFL, he's going to play 51% corner, 49% receiver. And then when it's time to pay him, they're going to view him as a corner and he's going to get paid less because that's how life works.
The financial part of this is fascinating and something that, maybe I'm not thinking about in the moment here, like a couple weeks out from the draft, but for his long-term, though, like he's got to think about that stuff. So that's interesting. We'll end the Travis Hunter conversation with this. Obviously his athleticism is something that's on full display. One of the biggest reasons why he can do what he does. One of the biggest reasons why he's so coveted at the top of the draft. Is there anything though, you think that he does need to improve on at the next level, Kevin?
That's a good question. Honestly, not really. I think he is physical. I would just say his size, I guess, get the weight up a little bit. And that's kind of a natural criticism for every player going from the college to the NFL level. Because I think it's quite an endorsement, if you will, from Deion Sanders saying that Travis is way better than he was at this stage. So I feel like Deion Sanders was pretty good as a youngster in the NFL. And so for him to get that endorsement, I don't feel like there's any glaring issues. I would say the only one would be availability. Like I said, he has been injured. This past year, he was relatively healthy. The year before, he missed a few games. He missed a few games at Jackson State. I know he missed a few games his senior year of high school. So availability, right? And I think that also kind of boils down to the whole conversation we're having is like, do you want him out there that long if he's at risk of being injured? So I would just say availability, getting a little bit bigger and stronger. But he is a really good corner. Like you said earlier on the show, people viewed him as a prodigy at corner for like the longest time. And then all of a sudden, like it felt like it happened like maybe, I don't know, like 5 days ago, everyone's like, he's a wide receiver. And I'm like, where has this been? Right? Like it was always, he's a corner. Now it's like, he's got to be a receiver. I think people are just getting like in their heads about it. So I don't know. There's nothing really glaring that stands out because I think he genuinely loves the grind and understands what it takes to be great. Obviously, otherwise he wouldn't be pounding the table for a task this big.
Well, and you bring up the evaluations have certainly said that he should be a corner. I've already been thinking about him as a wide receiver since Andrew Berry made those comments at the combine. So that's kind of already been in my mind. But yes, 5 days ago, it does feel like is when it started to flip. That is the lowdown on Travis Hunter. We get the lowdown on Shedeur Sanders, who, believe it or not, could maybe still be in play for the Browns at number 2 or elsewhere. We'll talk about it with Kevin coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. The Armada Player of the Week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, we're taking a look at our draft prospects to pick one guy that stands apart, the guy that we believe showcases the strength and power needed to push the Cleveland Browns forward as we look ahead to next season. And this week's Armada clear-cut Player of the Week, I used the person we just talked about last week, so I can't do it again, even though it would have been very fitting. But this week we go with Abdul Carter. Carter is a versatile pass rusher who's proven to be rugged, hard-nosed football player. From different spots and stances across the defensive line, he conquers opposing quarterbacks with capability and confidence. And when it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer. That's exactly what I think Abdul Carter can do here in Cleveland. Just imagine him paired opposite of Myles Garrett. That is a truly scary thought. It's clear that our Player of the Week is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of our outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. All right, Kevin Borba back with us here as we got the breakdown on Travis Hunter. Now we want the breakdown on Shedeur Sanders. And I feel like there's actually more to talk about with Shedeur than even Travis Hunter, just because there's been so much said already about different aspects of his game, his personality, where he's going to go in this draft. And I start with that last thing, Kevin. Why do you think there's been such varying degrees of evaluations and grades on Shedeur to the point where it feels like he's either worthy of going in the top 5 or he's maybe a second-round pick for some people?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, and this has kind of been the hard part about the process for him specifically, is who his father is, right? It's Deion Sanders. I think there's people who love how confident he is, right? There's people who love the swagger he brings and sort of the energy, the aura, as the kids say. And then there's people who hate every aspect of it, right? There's a reason that he was called brash and arrogant. There's a reason that people are now questioning his arm strength, even though, I mean, and not every quarterback is going to be Patrick Mahomes, right? Not every quarterback is going to be Josh Allen. And I think that was one of the criticisms I saw Mel Kiper, of all people, throw against him like a month ago. Now Mel Kiper saying he's going to be a Hall of Famer, but he literally just said that yesterday. But a month ago, there was questions of like, oh, he's not Mahomes, he's not Allen. It's like rarely anyone is, right? That's why there's 4 quarterbacks in the NFL that could do that. So I think Shedeur Sanders kind of is a victim of his own family, is a victim of his own fame, and he's a victim of his own confidence, right? I think teams want, and this has sort of been a change in college football in general now. These guys are all getting paid hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars, the top end guys at least. And I think the NFL draft no longer feels like, oh, this is, oh, golly, like I'm here for the biggest job interview of my life. Like this is a big moment for me. Like all these guys expect to go to the NFL. Shedeur expects to go to the NFL. He comes in, and outside of Myles Garrett, he's probably your most famous player on your team if he comes in right now. And that goes for any team. And even with Myles Garrett, Shedeur Sanders is probably still more recognizable as a whole than Myles Garrett. We could probably debate that back and forth, but I would say it's pretty close. And so the fact that it's even a debate sort of shows where college football is at. And I think people in the NFL hate that, right? I think there's just like this notion of like, these guys should come in, be hungry, have no number on the back of their jersey, no name on the back of their jersey, and like earn it. And I just don't think that's like how college football works anymore. And I think people are like taking it out on Shedeur Sanders a lot more than other people.
Yeah, I was going to ask you sort of about like the name part of it, but you alluded to it there. You talked about it there already. And I think it's interesting because the more I've heard Shedeur talk, the more that I actually think it's a good quality that he has to what he brings to the table at the NFL level, especially in Cleveland, because you're probably not as familiar with Cleveland sports history or just the Browns history in general. But I mean, this team has gone through 40 quarterbacks since they've come back since 1999. Yeah, so like the window and the mannequin in the window. So like they've been searching for the right quarterback for years, and because of that, there is like an added pressure that comes with being the quarterback here. Not on the scale of like New York City or something like that. I get it, but still, like there is an added pressure, and I've felt this entire time that Shedeur will be well equipped to handle that because of his personality and his upbringing and who his father was. But there's so many people that view that as a negative thing, and it's just never. It makes sense to me because I know that's always a knock on people. It's like, well, he's too arrogant or something like that. I just don't view it as arrogance. I view it as confidence, and I think that's something that an NFL quarterback needs, and frankly, a potential Browns quarterback would need.
Yeah, I think it's really weird if he was cocky and like out here saying, I'm going to be Tom Brady, like if he was saying that, or I'm better than Mahomes, like then I'd be like, okay, let's pump the brakes. Like you haven't even like filled up a cup of water in the NFL, right? But he's confident in himself, right? I think the other day people got upset about this quote, this message. He said that he went to Jackson State and he went to Colorado, and both programs were struggling programs before he got there. And when he left, they were both not struggling programs, right? I think it's this weird thing that we don't like his confidence. And again, I think there's a multitude of reasons. And I think there's partially it's his family, partially it's our society as a whole. Take that information however you want to. I'm sure we can read between the lines there. Realistically, Shedeur Sanders is confident in himself. And I don't think that's a problem. I think that's a strength, because at the end of the day, when you get to the NFL, I think confidence is actually a factor that keeps careers alive. Right? If Bryce Young wasn't so confident, Bryce Young would be playing in the CFL right now, right? Because he had all the reasons in the world to give up on being the quarterback for the Panthers. Caleb Williams which he was confident. Jaden Daniels had a great year, so there wasn't any like struggles for him. But Caleb Williams was like the most confident guy ever. If he wasn't, who knows how his future would be with the Bears, right? Because the NFL beats you up and spits you out because no one wants to wait for these quarterbacks to develop. And so you need to have someone who thinks that they could step in and be great right away. And I don't see why that's a problem.
It is kind of funny because if it was the opposite, if he wasn't confident enough, that would be a knock on him. But now he's too confident, and somehow that's a knock on him. So it's kind of funny how we do these things and parse these things when we have these conversations throughout the pre-draft process. We saw last week he was airing it out a little bit at his pro day, throwing some of the deep balls, and that felt like sort of a direct not shot, but like a direct attempt to dispel some of the rumors about him not being able to like throw it deep. The arm strength has been a big issue though for Shedeur. The thing that people have talked about probably the most about what he does or doesn't bring to the table at the NFL level. Are people making that out to be more than what it really is?
I think so. Honestly, I think we've gotten to this point in like quarterback evaluations where it's like, can he throw it 85 yards? No, weak arm, right? As long as
if you're not Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes,
pretty much is like as soon as Mel Kiper said like the standard is Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, it's like, okay, Like that's like if you were dating and they're like the standard is 6'5" blonde and like whatever. Like it's like, okay, well that eliminates majority of the population. So like I think his arm as strong as Cam Ward's? No. Right? Cam Ward has a gifted ability to throw the ball. Does Shedeur Sanders make up for I won't say lack of arm strength because that makes it seem like I'm saying he has a weak arm, but does he make up for not having as strong as arm as others with his accuracy? I would say so. He completed 74% of his passes, right? He doesn't turn the ball over very much. And when you look at the interceptions he did throw, I urge people to go watch them because I would say half of them are like the flukiest thing I've ever seen. The very first one on the year, he threw it, a defender fell down, it hit his foot, and like bounced directly to his teammate. Like Shedeur Sanders protects the ball and he makes the throws that are necessary, right? There's never been a question in the game where it's like, we can't make this throw or we can't make this play because Shedeur can't throw it. I urge everyone to go look at the Baylor game, right? Shedeur Sanders had, if you guys don't know, Colorado was down 7 or maybe 8, 7 or 8. And they're at like the 50-ish yard line. And Shedeur Sanders fires a Hail Mary to a receiver. He drops it. Very next play, throws an even better pass, and they score a touchdown, right? Hail Mary, deep pass for the game, and it got there. So I think his arm is adequate enough. And I don't know, like if you're comparing him to Mahomes, Allen, whoever else, Justin Herbert, yeah, he's not up there in that upper echelon, but his arm is NFL enough. And I think we need to stop like comparing everyone to those top 3 guys because not everyone is those top 3 guys, as I keep saying.
I think that's really well said. So I'll get you out of here sort of with this thought. First, I'll ask, it's sort of a 2-part question here, but if you were the Browns sitting at 2, would you pull the trigger on Shedeur or Travis if you're deciding between, if those are 2 of the guys that are on the table for you? And if it's not Shedeur, where do you envision Shedeur Sanders actually ends up going? Because we have had some conversations here in Cleveland about this idea of, well, if he falls far enough, maybe the Browns trade back up and try to get him. Now, I've said I don't think he makes it past 21 where the Steelers would be drafting, and so you'd still have to give a decent amount up to get there. But is that something you even think would be possible depending on where you think he ultimately goes in this draft?
Yeah, I think the Browns should go Travis Hunter at 2. I really do. I think if you're the right team, which this is obviously a big if, to figure out how to use him, I think you're going to have one of the best players in the NFL. And I think that's hard to pass up. And the Browns, and you could feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, from an outsider's perspective, it feels like is a franchise that would not hurt from taking the best player available, which is a sure thing, right? Travis Hunter feels as sure a thing as possible. Yeah. And it doesn't feel like you guys have had that often.
So, yeah, but before you get into where you think Shedeur ultimately goes, I'll say up until last week, I probably would have said take the quarterback because this is again my opinion. I think Shedeur Sanders is good enough that he could be taken at 2 if you need that position. But the Browns owner, Jimmy Haslam, at the owners meetings, and I've talked about this already on the podcast, he made some comments about like not forcing the issue when it comes to the quarterback situation, because that is the biggest thing they need to resolve. And so hearing that, I think made me take a step back and say, okay, so this feels like a team that's ready to take the best player available and worry about the quarterback position somewhere else. And so because of that, I tend to agree with you that I think Travis Hunter makes the most sense of 2, because it sounds like they're not going to like force the issue at quarterback if they don't 100% feel like that player's worthy of going number 2 overall.
Yeah, and I think that's it seems profound to not force a draft pick, but that's how we end up with busts, because it's like, what do you mean Johnny Manziel's not the guy? And it's like, well, was Johnny Manziel supposed to go at 20 or wherever he went? No, but we made ourselves think he'd be the guy, right? I thought Johnny Manziel, granted I was like 12 or 13 at the time, I thought he was the second
Everybody
coming.
liked Johnny Manziel.
Yeah, I thought he was the second coming, and he wasn't, because I thought he was cool in college, and we forced ourselves to think like this is the guy. So back to the question, I really like the idea of trading back up for Shedeur. I really do, because realistically the best, and I'll answer both questions at the same time here. My favorite landing spot for Shedeur is the Saints. And I talked to Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints about this. You have Derek Carr, who I think is willing to mentor Shedeur and sort of takes pressure off of him having to play right away. Deshaun, from my understanding, and feel free to hop in here, is not going to play next year, correct?
There's no like guaranteed timeline, but it certainly looks like he's probably not playing most of the season. I don't think the Browns really want him to either. So
right, and even if he does play, or even when he does eventually return, Deshaun Watson isn't returning to be a mentor, right? We all know like he still thinks that he is the guy he once was in Houston. We all know he's not, but that realization has not hit him yet. And so I would want Shedeur to go to a room where he's going to have a mentor, not a competitor. And by saying that, I don't want people to think I'm saying Shedeur doesn't want to compete. I think you need to have someone who understands like this. You are not our guy anymore. Like Tyrod Taylor, for instance, is like the prototypical like bridge quarterback because he gets it. He knows he is not the franchise quarterback of whatever franchise. He did it with the Chargers. He did it with the Jets. He's done it with everyone he's been a part of, every franchise. And I think Derek Carr could do just that. And so if I'm the Browns, the Saints are sitting there at 9. If they pass up on him, I think you look at teams 12 through 19 because you have the Cowboys who have Dak, the Dolphins have Tua, the Colts, they're whatever they are. I think they have 2 average quarterbacks that they're going to make play out this year. The Falcons took Penix, Cardinals have Kyler Murray, Bengals have Joe Burrow, Seattle just took a huge risk on Sam Darnold. I think you kind of make a move there and trade above your division rivals and say, hey, we took your guy and now we have 2 of the best players. And just imagine, and I know this isn't like the goal of every franchise to have publicity, but imagine the publicity of having Travis and Shedeur, right? The positive energy, you bring in new fans, you probably bring in Deion Sanders eventually in terms of like, just like his general attention. So I think that would be quite a move and quite a draft for the Browns. And I don't think anyone would fault them for being aggressive. Sorry to be so long-winded there.
No, you're okay. I appreciate the answer. And yeah, the Saints, it does kind of feel like if he makes it past the Saints, like all bets are off in terms of where he goes. That feels like a good fit if he doesn't go in the top 3. I would love it if they traded back up for him and they got both players. That'd be awesome. There's some Browns fans who I know don't love Shedeur, and so they maybe feel differently. But that'd be a hell of a draft to sort of open things up at the first round if that happened. Coming up next, we debate if Shedeur Sanders or Myles Garrett is more No, I'm just kidding. We're not going to actually do that. Kevin, I appreciate you giving us some time, man. This was awesome. I hope. I know we probably don't get the Browns in Colorado don't get to cross paths too often, but yeah. I'm sure with Deion Sanders still there, there's going to be a lot more NFL prospects coming through. So I really hope we get a chance to do this down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
We will answer some of your questions when we come back on the Locked On Browns podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Epicor. Every team knows the value of hard work, taking pride in what you build and practicing every detail to get the best results. But no player, no matter how amazing, can do it all alone. Working together makes getting the win easier at Epicor. The all-stars are the workers, manufacturers, and distributors who create and deliver the things we all need, from aerospace to electrical to medical devices. Epicor ERP solutions are created by industry experts to help make every day easier. Seeing your whole supply chain is easier. Managing logistics is easier. Responding to price changes is also easier. From small businesses with big dreams to growing enterprises with global visions, we'll equip you with the right tools to move forward, think ahead, and lead the way. Because as the clock ticks down, you need to make the most of every hardworking minute. Easier doesn't cut corners. Easier finds the lane. Discover your success at www.easierwithepicor.com. That's www.easierwithepicor.com. Great stuff from Kevin Borba of Locked On Buffs. I thought he had some tremendous stuff to say about both Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders. His thought that they should trade back up and get him if he falls into the teens is pretty interesting. But as he mentioned, the idea that he makes it past the Saints feels unlikely. That feels like the spot he's going to ultimately land. He's been projecting that on his podcast as well. So we'll see if it happens. I'd be okay in a world where they end up with Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders, but that's just me. Anyway, I do want to get to, on a Fan Friday, questions from you, the listener, the fan of the Cleveland Browns. In this week's question that I polled, and by the way, I don't only want to poll one question. I want more engagement here. I want you to send me tweets at Spencito_. Jump in the comments and send me some things that you maybe want to talk about, and I'll try to poll them from different platforms. I want this segment to ultimately become something where I answer multiple questions each week. But lately I've just kind of been pulling just like one good one that I've kind of had thrown my way. And so Tom Brennan on Twitter he responded with this pretty solid question. With the glaring need at quarterback, wide receiver, and running back, when do the Browns address safety? I think it's a fascinating one to get into here because we have spent so much time talking about those three positions primarily. I think tackle has obviously been mentioned. You can, if you list out the Browns' needs, quarterback is one, tackle might be two, wide receiver, running back might be 2 or 3. Wide receivers probably up there. Like the offensive needs outweigh the defensive needs. You could argue they need more defensive line help, pass rusher or interior. You can argue they need maybe more linebacker help, especially with the JOK situation. And safety is obviously a glaring one because of the Juan Thornhill situation. And I want to preface this by saying I wouldn't be surprised if the Browns go in the next year sort of banking on somebody like Ronnie Hickman to be their starting free safety and be that guy who fills that void for the Browns, and they kind of just like piecemeal that spot together. Because let's face it, like there's no way you can find like a frontline player for everything unless at least not given the current state of the Browns, right? Like they don't have a lot of money to spend. That's been evident in their lack of moves in free agency. The draft is going to be kind of where it's at for them. That's going to be their jam. So they are going to have to address some of these things. And they've already sort of given you an idea of what they're still looking at to address in the draft based on what they haven't done and what moves they haven't made to this point. And so it's going to be interesting to see how they address all of these things. I think they will still draft a safety, but I don't know that like it's going to be somebody in the early rounds that you think about maybe starting immediately for this team. I could see them sort of floating Ronnie Hickman as the guy for a while until maybe they pivot to a rookie or somebody else is ready. But I could see them just kind of trying to make that position work for a little while here. So to answer Tom's question more specifically, though, that leaves me believing they won't go safety in the first 3 rounds. I just don't think it's in the cards for them. They have too many other needs. I think they would probably even prioritize like defensive line over a safety spot in the first couple rounds here, which probably takes some of the top names off the board. Like Nick Emmanwori is a guy who I've really loved watching his tape out of South Carolina. He's phenomenal. I'd love it if the Browns could get him, but I don't think it's going to be in the cards because he's now projected as like a late first round or potential second round pick. Xavier Watts out of Notre Dame. I had Danny Cunningham of Locked On Cavs who knows all who does talk all Cleveland sports on other platforms. He's a big Notre Dame guy, and he talked about Xavier Watts as a guy that he wishes he would love to see the Browns get. He's probably like at low on the low end, probably like a 3rd round pick. And so I still think that's probably too early for the Browns to try to address that spot. I could be wrong. I just don't know that they're going to prioritize that spot specifically as much as maybe some people think, because I think there's bigger, more pressing needs that they have to get to. So I too like Xavier Watts. I think that would be a good one if they were to focus on it in the 3rd round. Andrew Makuba out of Texas is another guy that I really like. But again, slated as kind of like a 3rd round pick. And so when I think about the options from there, I do think that this is probably something they address later on in the draft. So maybe like pick 104 when they get to the 4th round. Maybe that's where they like a Lathan Ransom or a Jalen Reed. Jalen Reed probably maybe a little too early still to take him. Even Ransom to an extent, I think that's probably a little too early. They don't have a 5th round pick though. So depending on what they want to do in the 6th round where they have a bunch of picks, if they want to wait it out and see if any of those guys are still there, that maybe that's what they would do. Maybe they would trade back up into the 5th to get somebody like Ransom or Reed. But those are 2 other guys I kind of have my attention on in terms of where the Browns could go at safety. Ransom, especially because he's an Ohio State guy, just played down the street, and so there's an easy sort of Ohio connection there, and they had easy access to sort of watch him and see him. But those are some of the names that I have in mind. But I would sort of warn against thinking that the Browns are probably going to do a lot are going to go safety early. Even though it's a hole on their defense right now, I still see them going elsewhere and looking elsewhere. Those first 3 rounds where they have 4 picks in the top 100, 5 picks in the top 104 picks. Like 104 could be the one that they finally maybe look at safety, depending on who's there still. But I don't think you're going to see them prioritize that in the first 2 rounds. I just think there's other bigger things that they're going to be looking at. But that's just me. I could be wrong there. But to answer Tom's question, probably not until at least the 4th round, but it might be even later, which means 6th round potentially for the Browns. And at that point, you're kind of getting a project that you hope turns into something, which is why, again, I go back to I could see them simply starting Ronnie Hickman and calling it a day and having sort of like a cast of characters that plays at that spot, because obviously they didn't sign anybody in free agency. And let's face it, that hasn't worked out very well for Andrew Berry anyway. So that's my answer to that question. You can get your questions to me at Spencito _ in the comment section here on Locked On Browns for another Fan Friday next week. And I'm sure going into the draft next week, there will be a ton of questions that you might have for me that you want answered. So please, please, please hit me up. Send me your questions. We'll have some fun with it. And as always, I encourage you to subscribe to the podcast wherever it is that you get your podcasts. And of course, right here at the Locked On Browns YouTube channel, make us your first listen every single day. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Draft, or keep it local. Check out Locked On Cavs, Locked On Guardians. Thanks for being an everydayer with the Locked On Podcast Network. I will talk to you again real soon, Cleveland. Peace.